Long Island. Most people think of beaches, quiet streets, or a lazy drive on a sunny afternoon. But hidden along its northern shore is a world that feels like it belongs in a movie, a place full of enormous mansions, manicured gardens, and wealth so immense it's almost unbelievable. This is the Gold Coast. And no, it's not made of gold, but in terms of money, power, and extravagance, it might as well be. Back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, America was booming. Railroads stretched across the country, factories churned out goods at record speed, and a few people were making fortunes that seemed impossible to grasp. For some of these ultra-wealthy families, New York City wasn't enough. They wanted privacy, space, and homes that could show the world exactly how successful they were. And so, the Gold Coast began to take shape. Picture this: giant marble staircases that shine so much you could see your reflection, towers and turrets stretching skyward, and gardens so perfectly trimmed that your own backyard suddenly feels wild and untamed. Each estate was more than a home, it was a statement. Families like the Vanderbilts, Whitneys, and Phipps wanted everyone to know, we are rich, we are powerful, and yes, we probably have more chandeliers than your entire neighborhood. But it wasn't all about showing off. Behind the polished doors and golden doorknobs were secrets, quirks, and eccentricities. Some estates had hidden passageways connecting rooms or even entire wings of the house. Why? Some say it was for safety, some for sneaking around unnoticed, and some probably just because they could. When you have millions, even the oddest idea can become reality. And the gardens! These weren't simple lawns with a few flowers. They were masterpieces, sculptures, fountains, exotic plants imported from Europe, and winding paths that made walking around the grounds feel like a little adventure. Some gardens were even larger than the houses themselves. Owners spent fortunes making every corner perfect. If you could afford a mansion bigger than a city block, why not add a fountain shaped like a Roman god? Life on the Gold Coast wasn't all marble floors and flowers. There was plenty of drama too. Families competed quietly but fiercely. Who could have the biggest ballroom? The most impressive art collection? The tallest tower? Even details like gold-plated doorknobs or custom chandeliers became points of pride and sometimes jealousy. And the people behind these mansions, they had love stories, rivalries, and secrets just like anyone else, but amplified by wealth and social pressure. Affairs, jealousies, and family arguments were part of daily life. Some stories are funny, like the heir who imported a European chef just to get authentic truffles for his breakfast eggs. Spoiler, it didn't go as planned. Others show how money could turn small disagreements into elaborate dramas. Walking along the Gold Coast today, you can almost feel the history lingering. Some estates are open to the public, giving visitors a glimpse into the lives of the rich and powerful. Others remain private, hidden behind high walls and guarded gates, keeping their secrets safe for decades. And it's not just the famous estates. Smaller, lesser-known homes also have fascinating stories: secret jazz parties during Prohibition, hidden mazes in gardens, or unusual collections of art and curiosities. Each one shows a different side of life on the Gold Coast, from luxury to eccentricity. The mansions, the gardens, the private tunnels, and the hidden rooms, they all tell a story of ambition, creativity, and a lifestyle that was larger than life. Some estates are enormous and ornate, others are smaller but equally unique, reflecting the personalities and desires of their owners. Every corner seems designed to impress, every hallway to awe, and every garden path to surprise. Some estates stand untouched, preserved with care, while others have faded with time, left to weather storms and seasons. The Gold Coast holds this mix of the grand and the forgotten, the lively and the quiet, in every brick, every tree, and every hidden corner. Even today, the Gold Coast feels like a world apart, a place where the past whispers through the walls, where the gardens still carry a sense of design and intention, and where the history of America's wealth is written in stone, marble, and carefully trimmed hedges. The quiet streets, the towering gates, the sprawling lawns, they all hold pieces of a story that was lived, celebrated, and sometimes whispered about behind closed doors. The Gold Coast may no longer host the daily bustle of wealthy families, but the estates themselves remain, telling their stories through architecture, art, and the careful details left behind. Long before the grand mansions and sweeping gardens, the northern shore of Long Island was mostly farmland, forests, and quiet villages. Life was simple, slow, and peaceful. But by the late 1800s, things began to change. America was growing fast. Railroads connected cities, factories produced goods faster than ever, and a small number of people were making fortunes so enormous that it was almost unreal. Some of these families were the Vanderbilts, the Phipps, and the Whitneys. They had made their wealth in railroads, steel, oil, and finance. For them, New York City was crowded and noisy. They wanted space, privacy, and a way to show the world their success. Long Island's North Shore was perfect, close enough to the city for business and social events, but far enough to enjoy quiet, open land and breathtaking views. The first estates appeared slowly, but soon the area became a playground for America's richest. Wealthy families competed quietly but fiercely. Who could have the biggest house, the tallest tower, the most impressive ballroom? Even small details like marble staircases or gold-plated door handles were points of pride. If one family built a grand estate, the next family would make theirs bigger and fancier. Competition fueled creativity and sometimes ridiculous extravagance. By the early 1900s, the Gold Coast was no longer just a collection of estates. It had become a symbol of the Gilded Age, a period when wealth, ambition, and showmanship mixed freely. These estates were massive. Some had dozens of rooms, private libraries, ballrooms, indoor pools, and even personal theaters. Families hired the best architects and designers they could find, turning each estate into a unique masterpiece. McKim, Mead and White, Stanford White, and other famous architects worked on these homes, designing sweeping staircases, grand halls, and intricate details that could rival European palaces. Gardens and landscapes were just as important as the houses. Frederick Law Olmsted, who helped design Central Park, worked on some estates, creating gardens that were more like art than nature. Fountains, sculptures, imported plants, and winding paths turned every property into a small wonderland. Some gardens were bigger than the houses themselves, with private orchards, lakes, or mazes designed purely for entertainment. It wasn't cheap. Constructing a single estate could cost millions at a time, when even a factory owner might have been considered rich. And after building the mansion, families needed staff to run it: maids, cooks, gardeners, chauffeurs, and sometimes personal doctors or tutors. Life on the Gold Coast meant wealth, yes, but also the daily management of an enormous home. Fortunately, they had the resources to make even that easy. Social life on the Gold Coast was an important part of the rise of these estates. Private balls, yacht parties, and formal dinners became the way families displayed their status. Invitations were coveted, and gossip spread quickly among New York's elite. Events weren't just for fun, they were strategic. Hosting the most impressive gathering could influence social standing, business relationships, and even marriage prospects. But the Gold Coast was also a world of secrets and eccentricities. Some estates had hidden rooms, tunnels, or private staircases. These features could be practical, like providing safety during storms, or personal, like sneaking around without being noticed. Some were just quirks of wealthy owners who wanted something unusual or playful in their homes. It wasn't rare for an estate to have a private bowling alley, a hidden wine cellar, or even a personal zoo in the backyard. Even as the estates grew grander, the families were not immune to drama. Rivalries between neighbors, family disagreements, and social pressures were all part of life. Affairs, jealousy, and occasional scandals were whispered about, though rarely printed in newspapers. Wealth did not remove human nature, it amplified it. Walking along the Gold Coast today, the rise of these estates is clear. Some of the early mansions are still standing, showing off towers, columns, and gardens exactly as they were designed. Others have been demolished, leaving only historical records, photographs, or memories of parties and events that shaped the Gilded Age. Even the lesser-known homes reveal fascinating stories of ambition and lifestyle. The estates were more than houses, they were statements. Every design choice, every garden path, every marble staircase told a story about the family who built it. The Gold Coast became a symbol not just of money, but of creativity, personal taste, and the human desire to make an impact on the world around them. By the time the Gold Coast had fully risen, it was a landscape filled with mansions, gardens, and private wonders. Families lived in a world of comfort and extravagance, surrounded by beauty, innovation, and sometimes odd quirks. The North Shore of Long Island had become a place apart from ordinary life, a world where wealth, ambition, and imagination shaped every inch of the land. And though many of the original families have long since left, sold their estates, or passed on, the houses and gardens remain. Towers, marble staircases, fountains, and hidden paths still stand as evidence of the ambition and lifestyles that created the Gold Coast. When you first see the Gold Coast mansions, one thing hits you immediately: these homes were built to impress. Not just impress, but to almost overwhelm. Towers, turrets, marble, columns, sprawling wings, these estates weren't just houses. They were statements of power, ambition, and sometimes pure extravagance. Back in the Gilded Age, the wealthy wanted more than just a comfortable home. They wanted a place that shouted, "Look at us, look at what we can do," and architects were happy to oblige. Families hired the best in the business, people who had designed palaces and important public buildings, and told them, "Make it bigger. Make it fancier, make it unforgettable." One of the most famous architectural styles on the Gold Coast was Buch's Arts. Think grand staircases, marble floors, gold accents, and ceilings so high they could make you dizzy. These mansions were symmetrical, elegant, and perfectly planned, every room, hallway, and window carefully placed for maximum effect. The style borrowed heavily from European palaces, and the wealthy owners loved it. Some even imported materials straight from France or Italy just to make their homes authentic. Another popular style was Tudor Revival, which looked like it came straight out of a fairy tale. Dark wooden beams, steep roofs, and intricate stonework made these homes look old world, as if the family had been part of European aristocracy for centuries. Even though most of the owners were first-generation American wealth, they loved the idea of old money elegance. French Chartres-inspired mansions were also common. These homes had elaborate towers, massive windows, and gardens that stretched for acres. Families wanted every detail to be perfect, from the carvings on the doors to the fountains in the front yard. Some even had their own private chapels or theatres, so they could entertain guests without leaving the estate. Designing these estates wasn't easy. Architects had to balance size, functionality, and style. A mansion might have dozens of bedrooms, multiple ballrooms, libraries, conservatories, and kitchens big enough to feed hundreds of people. Secret passageways or private staircases were sometimes added for privacy or convenience. Every corner of the house was carefully planned, not just for beauty, but to impress visitors. Gardens were equally important. Landscape architects like Frederick Law Olmsted created outdoor spaces that were extensions of the house itself. Winding paths, fountains, groves, flower beds, and artificial lakes turned the grounds into living works of art. Some gardens were larger than the houses, with hidden benches, secluded gazebos, and mazes designed purely for amusement. A walk through these gardens could feel like stepping into another world, one designed entirely for pleasure and admiration. Inside the houses, luxury continued. Ceilings were hand-painted, chandeliers were crystal, and walls were often covered in rare tapestries or custom artwork. Floors were marble, oak, or imported hardwood. Fireplaces were carved from stone with intricate designs. Even the bathrooms, kitchens, and servant quarters were made to impress. The wealthiest owners didn't just want functional rooms, they wanted spaces that showcased taste, innovation, and money. Some estates even had unexpected features: private bowling alleys, swimming pools, indoor gyms, and elevators were installed long before most ordinary homes had basic electricity. Wine cellars could hold thousands of bottles. Libraries were filled with rare books. Some families even had personal zoos or aviaries on their property. If an idea was extravagant enough, and the family had the money, architects and builders would find a way to make it real. But it wasn't just about size or gadgets. Every mansion reflected the personality and preferences of its owner. Some were showy, meant to be the center of attention. Others were elegant but understated, showcasing refinement rather than loud wealth. Even within the same style, every estate was unique. Materials, colors, shapes, and landscaping choices created homes that could be instantly recognized as belonging to a particular family. Maintaining these homes was another challenge. Dozens of staff were required to keep everything running smoothly. Maids polished marble floors daily, gardeners kept the grounds perfect, and cooks prepared meals for dozens of family members and guests. The houses weren't just homes, they were tiny kingdoms with their own rules, hierarchy, and rhythms. Walking along the Gold Coast today, the architecture still impresses. Even the houses that have been altered, divided, or restored retain their grand designs. Turrets, columns, wide staircases, and ornate gates all point back to a time when wealth and style were inseparable. Even smaller estates, which might not have the same fame as the Breakers or Ohika Castle, reveal a dedication to design, creativity, and personal vision. The Gold Coast mansions weren't built for practicality. They were built to inspire awe, to create a sense of wonder, and to reflect the power of those who lived there. Every detail, from the tiniest carving to the largest hall, was intended to show what wealth could achieve. And even today, walking past these estates, it's hard not to feel the same sense of amazement that visitors must have felt over 100 years ago. Some estates remain private, carefully preserved by owners who appreciate their history. Others have been opened to the public, allowing people to see the grandeur firsthand, and a few, sadly, have been lost to time, demolished, or left in ruin. But even in decay, the architecture still tells a story of ambition, taste, and the human desire to create something extraordinary. The towers, gardens, staircases, and hidden rooms all speak to a world where imagination and wealth met without limits. Every mansion, no matter its size, shows the lengths people went to live in style and leave a mark on their surroundings. The Gold Coast was, and still is, a testament to excess in architecture, a place where every wall, every window, and every corner was designed to impress. When you talk about the Gold Coast, one name comes up more than any other: Vanderbilt. The Vanderbilt family practically defined what it meant to live in luxury on Long Island. Their fortune, built on railroads and shipping, was massive, and they didn't hold back when it came to showing it. For the Vanderbilts, an estate wasn't just a home, it was a symbol of power, status, and taste. William K. Vanderbilt and his descendants were among the first to move to Long Island's North Shore, building estates that immediately set the standard for the area. One of the most famous, the Breakers in Newport, Rhode Island, had already shown their love for grand architecture, but on Long Island they expanded the idea even further. Their homes weren't just big, they were enormous. Some had dozens of bedrooms, ballrooms that could host hundreds of guests, and entire wings dedicated to art and entertainment. The Breakers and other Vanderbilt estates were designed by the top architects of the time, including Richard Morris Hunt. Hunt was known for his Buch's art style, which emphasized symmetry, grand staircases, classical columns, and high ceilings. He worked closely with the Vanderbilts to create homes that were both opulent and carefully planned, balancing the need for impressive public spaces with private areas for the family. The gardens of the Vanderbilt estates were equally spectacular. Landscape architects were brought in to design elaborate lawns, fountains, and groves. Some gardens included mazes, statues imported from Europe, and intricate flower beds. The grounds often stretched for dozens of acres, and staff worked tirelessly to maintain the perfect appearance. Walking through these gardens was like stepping into a living painting, every path and corner carefully designed for maximum effect. Inside the houses, luxury continued. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and walls lined with rare tapestries and artworks created an atmosphere that was both refined and overwhelming. Libraries contained thousands of rare books, and dining rooms could seat entire social circles for extravagant meals. Kitchens were staffed with teams of chefs who prepared elaborate menus for daily life and special events. Even the servants' quarters were designed to be functional and comfortable, reflecting the scale and complexity of life on the estate. One of the remarkable things about the Vanderbilt legacy is how quickly they expanded their influence on the Gold Coast. With multiple estates along Long Island's North Shore, they set trends that other wealthy families eagerly followed. If the Vanderbilts built a grand ballroom, other families wanted one even bigger. If they installed a private theater, neighbors started hiring architects to create their own. The Vanderbilts weren't just living in luxury, they were shaping the lifestyle of an entire region. Social life on the Vanderbilt estates was another key part of their influence. The family hosted balls, parties, and dinners that were legendary. Invitations were coveted, and the events themselves became a form of currency, a way to assert status and forge connections. Guests would travel from New York City and beyond, sometimes arriving in horse-drawn carriages or private yachts, all to attend the gatherings. Each event was carefully planned to impress, with music, elaborate decor, and food that matched the grandeur of the estate. The family's personal lives were often as dramatic as their homes. Marriages, affairs, and rivalries occasionally made the news, and some stories are almost too extravagant to believe. Heirs and heiresses traveled to Europe, imported art and furniture, and commissioned custom clothing, always maintaining the image of wealth and elegance. The Vanderbilt name became synonymous with both luxury and social prominence. Despite all the grandeur, the Vanderbilt estates were also practical in certain ways. Electricity, indoor plumbing, central heating, and other modern amenities were incorporated early, making life more comfortable while maintaining the appearance of old-world elegance. Some estates even had elevators, hidden passageways, and private garages, innovations that were far ahead of most contemporary homes. Walking through the Vanderbilt's Long Island estates today, you can still feel the scale and ambition of the family. The towers, grand staircases, gardens, and decorative details reflect not just wealth, but a particular vision of what a home could be. Even smaller rooms like private studies or sitting areas were designed with care, creating a balance between lavish public spaces and intimate private areas. The Vanderbilt legacy is also seen in how the estates influenced others on the Gold Coast. Families like the Whitneys, Phipps, and others look to the Vanderbilts as examples of what a true estate should be. The scale, the design, and the lifestyle became models to emulate, and the competition fueled even more extravagant construction throughout the region. By the early 20th century, the Vanderbilts had firmly established themselves as the benchmark for wealth and style on the Gold Coast. Their estates were centers of social activity, architectural innovation, and landscaping excellence. They didn't just build houses, they built landmarks that still define the area today. Some Vanderbilt homes have been preserved, allowing visitors to experience the scale and beauty firsthand. Others have changed hands, adapted, or even been demolished, but the influence of the family remains. Every marble staircase, every landscaped garden, and every grand hall tells the story of a family that shaped not only Long Island's North Shore, but also the image of American wealth in the Gilded Age. Even in quiet moments, the Vanderbilt estates reveal their character. A row of sculpted hedges, a fountain in the sunlight, or a columned porch overlooking the grounds can remind visitors of the ambition and creativity that went into these homes. The Vanderbilt set a standard that others followed, creating a legacy that is still visible in the architecture, gardens, and history of the Gold Coast. When most people think of the Gold Coast estates, the first thing that comes to mind is the houses, the marble staircases, tall towers, and enormous ballrooms. But step outside and you enter another world, the gardens. These weren't just lawns or flower beds. They were carefully designed landscapes, full of surprises, hidden corners, and sometimes secrets that even most visitors would never notice. Many estates on the Gold Coast employed famous landscape architects to design the grounds. Frederick Law Olmsted, who helped create Central Park in New York City, was one of the visionaries behind some of these gardens. He treated each estate as a work of art, arranging trees, shrubs, flowers, and pathways to create experiences, not just beauty. Walking through one of these gardens was like exploring a carefully choreographed story. The twists and turns, the secluded benches, and the hidden fountains all planned to delight and occasionally surprise. Some gardens were massive, stretching over dozens of acres. Within these expanses, there were mazes designed for fun or challenge. Hidden pathways led to quiet gazebos or secluded seating areas where the family could escape from the bustle of the house. Secret alcoves often offered shade and privacy, places where lovers, friends, or family members could meet without being seen. In a way, these gardens were outdoor extensions of the mansion's hidden rooms and passageways. Water features were a key part of the Gold Coast gardens. Fountains, ponds, and even small streams were carefully arranged to create both beauty and sound. Some fountains were carved in the shapes of classical gods or mythical creatures, while ponds were stocked with fish or swans. For some estates, water features were more than decoration. They served practical purposes, like irrigation or reflecting light into certain areas of the garden. But mostly, they were there to impress and entertain. Planting choices were far from ordinary. Families imported rare and exotic plants from Europe and Asia, creating gardens that felt like miniature global tours. Tulips, roses, orchids, and unusual trees were carefully placed to bloom in different seasons, ensuring the garden always looked impressive. Some estates even had greenhouses or conservatories, allowing tropical or delicate plants to survive the Long Island winters. The gardens were not only designed for the family's enjoyment, they were also part of the estate's public image. When guests visited, they were often guided through paths that highlighted the estate's beauty, architecture, and wealth. Every tree, every flower, every sculpture was part of the performance. But behind the carefully curated views were hidden areas that visitors rarely saw. Service paths for gardeners, storage areas, and private spaces allowed the estate to function without ruining the magical appearance of the landscape. Some of the more unusual secrets involved playful or eccentric ideas. Certain estates included hidden grottos, small bridges, or artificial ruins, meant to surprise guests as they wandered through the grounds. In some cases, these features served as conversation starters, party spots, or even romantic hideaways. A garden path might curve suddenly to reveal a statue, a fountain, or a secluded bench, creating moments of discovery that made exploring the grounds feel like a treasure hunt. Other secrets were more practical. Estates often had hidden irrigation systems, private gates leading to service roads, or concealed storage for gardening tools and outdoor furniture. Some gardens had private vegetable patches or orchards tucked away, supplying the kitchens with fresh produce without disturbing the aesthetic of the main lawn. The families wanted the grounds to look perfect at all times, so hidden planning and design were as important as the visible beauty. Lighting was another subtle secret. Before electricity was common, estates used strategically placed lanterns, lamps, and reflective surfaces to create ambience at night. Some paths were lit so faintly that they felt magical, while others guided guests safely to certain areas of the garden. The combination of design and lighting allowed the gardens to feel alive even after sunset, extending the use and enjoyment of the grounds. Gardens were also a stage for social life. Parties often moved from the mansion to the gardens, where guests could mingle among fountains, walkways, and shaded groves. Some estates even had outdoor dining areas or small pavilions for tea, cocktails, or musical performances. The family could control what was visible to guests, creating a sense of intimacy and wonder while still showcasing their wealth and taste. Even for the families themselves, the gardens held secrets. Private nooks allowed them to escape from servants, visitors, or siblings. Lovers could meet in secluded areas, children could explore without being watched, and family members could enjoy quiet reflection away from the main house. The gardens were simultaneously public and private, beautiful and functional, playful and serious. Walking through a Gold Coast garden today, it's easy to see the artistry, but harder to notice the hidden elements. A hedge might hide a bench, a fountain could conceal a small pathway, and a tree might shelter a tiny alcove. These subtle features were part of the charm and mystery, making each garden feel alive and full of surprises. The combination of scale, beauty, and secrecy made these gardens as memorable as the mansions themselves. Every estate had its own style, its own personality, and its own set of hidden features. Some gardens were formal and symmetrical, others wild and free-flowing. Some focused on flowers, others on water, sculpture, or trees. But all of them shared a sense of creativity, ambition, and sometimes whimsy that reflected the families who built them. Even today, the Gold Coast Gardens hold that magic. Paths, fountains, statues, and hidden corners remain as evidence of the care, planning, and imagination poured into them. The estates may no longer be bustling with the daily life of wealthy families, but the gardens still tell stories of creativity, design, and the clever secrets hidden among flowers, trees, and walkways. Life on the Gold Coast wasn't just about big houses, marble staircases, or perfectly trimmed gardens. It was also about people and the way they lived. And for the wealthy families of Long Island, living often meant parties. Extravagant, over-the-top, unforgettable parties that became the stuff of gossip and legend. The social calendar of the Gold Coast was packed. Balls, dinners, afternoon teas, yacht parties, and holiday gatherings filled the weeks and months. Invitations were highly coveted, and being left out of a party could be considered a slight, even if it wasn't intentional. These events were about more than fun. They were about status. Who was invited, who attended, and what they wore mattered just as much as the decorations or the menu. Ballrooms were the heart of social life. Families built massive rooms capable of hosting hundreds of guests. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above polished marble floors, and orchestras played live music for dancing. Some ballrooms had balconies overlooking the main floor, allowing people to watch and be seen at the same time. Imagine stepping into a room where every detail, from the floral arrangements to the silverware, was designed to impress. Yacht parties were another popular feature. Families with access to private docks hosted lavish gatherings on the water. Guests would arrive in style, sometimes in formal wear, other times in more casual yet expensive attire. Food, drinks, and music were provided, often in abundance, and the entire event became a spectacle of wealth and elegance. The waters of Long Island Sound reflected the glow of lanterns and the laughter of well-dressed guests enjoying themselves under the stars. Afternoon teas were slightly more restrained, but no less luxurious. In the gardens or smaller drawing rooms of estates, guests would sip imported teas, sample delicate pastries, and engage in polite conversation. These gatherings were quieter but served a purpose: networking. Alliances, marriages, and business opportunities were often discussed in hushed tones over scones and finger sandwiches. The menu at these parties was always extravagant. Chefs were often brought from Europe or trained extensively in French or Italian cuisine. Multi-course meals could include dozens of dishes, from delicate hors d'oeuvres to rich desserts. Some estates even had wine cellars with thousands of bottles, ready to supply any event, no matter the size or extravagance. Every dish, every plate, every decoration was meant to showcase the family's taste, wealth, and ability to entertain flawlessly. Entertainment extended beyond food and drink. Live orchestras, dancers, and sometimes even small theatrical performances kept guests amused. Some estates had personal theatres for private shows, while others set up temporary stages in gardens or ballrooms. Musicians might play classical pieces one moment, switch to jazz another, depending on the mood and the guests' preferences. The goal was simple: ensure no one forgot the event, the family, or the estate for years to come. Dress codes were elaborate. Women wore long gowns, often custom-made, adorned with beads, lace, or embroidery. Men wore tuxedos or formal suits, sometimes with accessories imported from Europe. Every outfit was part of the performance, contributing to the atmosphere of sophistication and luxury. Fashion and appearance mattered as much as behavior and conversation. Not every party was grand. Smaller gatherings also took place, often for close friends or family. These events allowed families to enjoy their estates more intimately, away from the eyes of the public or wider social circles. Even at these quieter gatherings, attention to detail remained high. Flowers arranged perfectly, food presented beautifully, and seating carefully planned to encourage conversation and comfort. Some parties were slightly scandalous, especially when gossip or romance was involved. Secret romances, whispered conversations, and rivalries sometimes played out in the background while guests danced or enjoyed refreshments. But even these moments were part of the charm and excitement of Gold Coast social life. Etiquette was strict, but clever guests could navigate it to their advantage, whether for romance, alliances, or simple amusement. For children, parties were a different kind of fun. Estates often had special rooms, playgrounds, or gardens where kids could play while adults mingled. Some larger estates even hired entertainers or set up small performances to keep young guests amused. Despite the grandeur and seriousness of adult events, the presence of children added life, laughter, and energy to the gatherings. Servants were essential to making these events run smoothly. Maids, butlers, cooks, and gardeners worked behind the scenes, ensuring every glass was filled, every dish served at the right time, and every detail attended to. Their work was invisible to most guests, but without them, the parties wouldn't have run nearly as seamlessly or impressively. Walking through the Gold Coast today, the echoes of these gatherings are still visible. Ballrooms, garden pavilions, and terraces remain, even if silent. Chandeliers hang from ceilings, gardens are still laid out for entertaining, and private docks hint at yacht parties long ago. Even though the people have changed, the architecture and design reflect a lifestyle built around social life, entertainment, and impressing guests at every turn. The parties of the Gold Coast were more than just events. They were performances, social tools, and markers of status. Every detail, from the architecture of the ballroom to the layout of the garden paths, was designed to make guests feel awe, admiration, and sometimes a touch of envy. They show a world where social life, wealth, and design were inseparable, and where entertainment was both an art and a necessity. Life on the Gold Coast might look perfect at first glance: marble staircases, sprawling gardens, sparkling chandeliers, and endless parties. But behind the beauty and glamour, there was another side. A side where enormous wealth could create pressure, tension, and even tragedy. The Gold Coast wasn't just a playground for the rich, it could also be a stage for secrets, scandals, and personal struggles. money can amplify everything. In the case of the Gold Coast families, it amplified ambition, rivalry, and sometimes even loneliness. Living in vast estates with dozens of rooms and hundreds of acres of land often meant isolation. Family members might rarely see each other, or parents could be busy managing businesses, leaving children to grow up with tutors, governesses, or nannies. Some heirs and heiresses found themselves trapped in a life dictated by wealth and expectation rather than personal choice. Scandals were common, though often hidden from public view. Affairs, divorces, and disagreements over inheritance quietly shaped family dynamics. Some families experienced bitter legal battles over estates and money, creating tension that lasted for years. Disputes weren't always visible to outsiders, but within the walls of these mansions, drama could rival any story from a novel. Tragedy also struck in unexpected ways. The size of the estates sometimes posed practical dangers. Staircases and balconies, grand as they were, could be hazardous. Fires, though rare, were devastating. In some cases, the immense cost of maintaining these estates became a burden, forcing families to sell or abandon parts of their property. Even wealth could not prevent accidents, heartbreak, or unexpected misfortune. Isolation could also affect social relationships. While the Gold Coast was full of parties and events, genuine friendship was sometimes scarce. Guests were often more interested in status than in real connection, and families felt pressure to maintain appearances at all times. This social tension could lead to misunderstandings, rivalries, and even resentment among neighbors. Even children grew up in a world where every action was observed, judged, and compared, leaving little room for simple, carefree living. Alcohol and gambling also played a role in the darker side of Gold Coast life. Private clubs, informal games, and occasional drinking could turn playful activities into serious conflicts. While many families used their resources responsibly, excess was never far away. Some parties ended in arguments or disputes over money, property, or social slights. Behind the laughter and music, a careful observer might notice undercurrents of tension, envy, or frustration. Mental health was another hidden struggle. The pressure to maintain wealth, status, and appearances could weigh heavily on heirs, heiresses, and spouses. Depression, anxiety, and stress were often quietly managed, sometimes ignored entirely, because the public image of perfection was more important than private struggles. The size and luxury of the estates could not replace real human connection or personal satisfaction. Even architecture sometimes contributed to this hidden tension. Hidden rooms, secret passageways, and private wings allowed privacy, but they could also encourage secrecy and isolation. Some families used these features to escape scrutiny, but they could also hide arguments, secret meetings, or clandestine activities. The very design that impressed visitors could contribute to hidden dramas within the household. Financial strain, surprisingly, could appear even among the richest. Maintaining these estates was incredibly expensive. Upkeep of gardens, staff salaries, heating, repairs, and renovations cost a fortune. Some families eventually found themselves selling parts of their property or even entire estates to cover expenses. In extreme cases, mansions fell into disrepair when funds ran low, a stark contrast to the grand image presented to the outside world. Relationships were often complex. Marriages arranged for social advantage rather than love were common. Heirs and heiresses might feel trapped by expectations, and some struggled to find personal happiness. Rivalries between siblings or cousins sometimes became long-term feuds, exacerbated by inheritance disputes or differing lifestyles. Even the wealthiest families could not escape ordinary human emotions like jealousy, frustration, or disappointment. Crime and legal issues occasionally touched the Gold Coast. Forgery, embezzlement, or mismanagement of funds sometimes occurred within family businesses, while outsiders occasionally attempted to exploit the wealth concentrated in these estates. The combination of enormous fortunes and limited oversight created opportunities for both clever schemes and tragic mistakes. Despite the grandeur, the Gold Coast also faced the reality of time. Wealth can protect and impress, but it cannot stop change. Estates that once thrived might fall into decay or be divided among heirs. Families who seemed untouchable faced financial challenges, changes in society, or simply the unpredictability of life. The human side of these stories, the fears, the struggles, and the private moments, often remained invisible to outsiders, hidden behind walls, gates, and gardens. Even with the parties, the luxury, and the beauty, there was always this shadow side. Life on the Gold Coast could be thrilling and exciting, but it was never simple. Behind every grand ballroom or sparkling chandelier, there were challenges, secrets, and human stories that were messy, complicated, and sometimes heartbreaking. The dark side of wealth was as much a part of the Gold Coast as the marble, gardens, and towers, and it shaped the history and the lives of those who lived there. On the Gold Coast, houses weren't just places to live. They were statements. Each mansion, each garden, each tower spoke volumes about the family who built it. The wealthiest Americans of the Gilded Age didn't just want a home. They wanted a symbol of power, prestige, and taste. And Long Island's North Shore was the perfect place to make that statement. For families like the Vanderbilts, Whitneys, and Phipps, the size of a mansion was often directly tied to social standing. A larger house, a taller tower, or a more elaborate ballroom was a way to say, "What belong at the top?" The estates were carefully designed to impress visitors, neighbors, and even passers-by. No detail was too small. Every column, window, and decorative feature was meant to communicate wealth and sophistication. Architectural style played a key role. Buick's Arts, French Renaissance, Tudor Revival, and other European-inspired designs were popular. Choosing the right style wasn't just about personal taste. It was about signaling knowledge, refinement, and cultural sophistication. Families wanted to show that they could rival European aristocracy, even if they were self-made Americans. Every tower, turret, and carved doorway had meaning, and the architects made sure it spoke clearly. Interiors were just as important as the exteriors. Marble staircases, crystal chandeliers, grand fireplaces, and rooms filled with rare art or imported furniture sent clear messages to visitors. Libraries, ballrooms, and private theatres weren't just functional, they were symbols of wealth, taste, and influence. Even the choice of wallpaper, drapery, or flooring was deliberate, part of a carefully crafted image. Gardens added another layer to the status game. Lavish landscaping, imported flowers, fountains, and statues weren't just beautiful, they were statements. They told visitors that the family could afford not just a big house, but an entire carefully curated environment. Winding paths and hidden alcoves allowed for private enjoyment while also showcasing the estate's design during social visits or parties. The Gold Coast Gardens were living proof that wealth could create art, leisure, and power all in one. Location also mattered. Some estates were built on hills with commanding views of the water, while others were tucked behind private gates for exclusivity. Families competed not just in size and style, but in visibility. A mansion visible from the water or a prominent road was a way to silently assert dominance. Some families even used tall gates, towering walls, or dramatic entranceways to create a sense of grandeur before a visitor ever reached the front door. Status wasn't limited to the home itself. Estates often included yachts, carriages, or private docks. Guests arriving by boat or carriage were part of the spectacle, reinforcing the idea that the family lived on another level. Even the servants' uniforms, perfectly pressed and coordinated, contributed to the image of order, wealth, and social standing. Every element was carefully curated to project power and success. Competitions between families were common, though usually subtle. If one family added a new wing, the neighbor might build an even taller tower. If one estate installed a rare fountain, others followed with larger or more elaborate designs. These competitions were friendly on the surface, but they fueled a culture of constant innovation, creativity, and extravagance. The Gold Coast became a showcase of what wealth could achieve when combined with ambition and taste. Social life reinforced these status symbols. Hosting elaborate parties, inviting influential guests, and displaying artwork or rare collections all became ways to cement a family's position in society. The mansion itself was part of the performance. Every room, every hallway, and every garden path could be used to impress and signal status. Visitors learned quickly which families were leaders in wealth, taste, and social influence. Even practical aspects of the estates conveyed status. Electricity, indoor plumbing, and central heating were carefully integrated into designs, showing modernity without sacrificing elegance. Chauffeurs, maids, gardeners, and cooks were part of the visible and invisible workforce that maintained the image of perfection. The more flawlessly an estate functioned, the higher the family's perceived competence and sophistication. Over time, the Gold Coast became a symbol not just of individual wealth, but of social hierarchy. Estates were used to distinguish one family from another, to show who was established, who was rising, and who could afford to innovate. Visiting an estate wasn't just sightseeing, it was observing a carefully orchestrated display of power, taste, and social importance. Even today, the estates of the Gold Coast retain that sense of status. Visitors can still see the size, design, and craftsmanship that once communicated social dominance. Gates, fountains, grand staircases, and sprawling lawns all reflect a time when homes were more than living spaces, they were symbols, carefully crafted to impress friends, neighbors, and history itself. Every mansion, every garden, and every ornate detail speaks to the culture of the Gold Coast, a culture where wealth, ambition, and public image were inseparable, and where estates were the ultimate measure of social standing. When people talk about the Gold Coast, they usually mention powerful businessmen, industrial giants, and famous family names. But behind many of these estates were women who shaped daily life, social culture, and even the look of the mansions themselves. The women of the Gold Coast were not just background figures. They were hosts, planners, decision makers, and sometimes the true force running everything quietly from behind the scenes. Many of these women came from wealthy families themselves or married into wealth at a young age. From the outside, their lives looked glamorous: designer gowns, grand parties, and endless leisure. But life inside a Gold Coast estate came with expectations. Women were expected to represent elegance, manners, and social grace at all times. Every public appearance mattered, and every event reflected not just on them, but on the entire family. Hosting was one of their most important roles. Planning a dinner or a ball was not a casual task. Women carefully selected guest lists, seating arrangements, menus, decorations, and entertainment. Who sat next to whom could influence business deals, social alliances, or family reputations. A successful event could elevate a family's status, while a poorly planned one could quietly damage it. Fashion played a huge role. Women of the Gold Coast were trendsetters. Gowns were often custom-made, inspired by Paris fashion houses. Jewelry was chosen carefully, sometimes passed down through generations, or purchased specifically to make an impression at an event. What a woman wore could become a topic of conversation long after the party ended. Fashion wasn't just about beauty, it was part of social strategy. Many women also influenced the design of their estates. While architects and builders handled the structure, women often made decisions about interiors, colors, furniture, artwork, and gardens. Drawing rooms, libraries, and private sitting areas reflected their tastes. Some women had a strong interest in art and design, filling their homes with paintings, sculptures, and antiques from Europe. These choices shaped the personality of each estate. Daily life inside the mansion was often managed by women. They oversaw servants, household schedules, and family routines. Running a large estate was almost like managing a small business. Staff needed direction. Supplies had to be ordered, and everything had to operate smoothly. While servants handled the work, women ensured order and standards were maintained. Not all women were comfortable in this world. Some struggled with the strict social rules and constant pressure to appear perfect. Privacy was rare, and gossip traveled fast along the Gold Coast. A small mistake or rumor could quickly become a topic of conversation among neighboring estates. For some women, the weight of expectations made life feel controlled rather than luxurious. Education varied. While many women were highly educated, fluent in languages, and knowledgeable about art and music, others were expected to focus mainly on social duties. Still, intelligence and charm were valuable assets. A sharp mind and graceful conversation could strengthen a family's social standing just as much as wealth. Charity work was another important role. Many women supported hospitals, schools, churches, and cultural institutions. Hosting fundraising events or donating money allowed them to contribute to society while maintaining social visibility. Charity work was both genuine and strategic. It helped communities while also reinforcing a family's public image. Marriage shaped much of their lives. Matches were often influenced by social standing and wealth. Love existed, but practicality often came first. Women were expected to support their husbands' ambitions and maintain family unity. Some embraced this role, while others quietly resented the limitations placed on their independence. Motherhood added another layer. Raising children in enormous estates meant delegating much of the daily care to nannies and tutors. Still, mothers were responsible for guiding manners, education, and social behavior. Preparing daughters for society and sons for leadership roles was considered part of their duty. Despite restrictions, some women quietly pushed boundaries. They pursued personal interests in writing, art, music, or travel. A few became influential social figures in their own right, known more for their personality and leadership than for their husband's name. Their influence was subtle but real, shaping social circles and cultural trends along the Gold Coast. Relationships among women could be supportive or competitive. Friendships formed through shared experiences, but rivalry was never far away. Comparing estates, fashion, parties, and social influence was common. Still, Many women relied on each other for companionship in a world that could feel isolating despite its luxury. Today, traces of these women remain in the estates they shaped. The layout of rooms, the choice of artwork, the design of gardens, and the traditions of entertaining all reflect their influence. Their presence is felt in the quiet elegance of drawing rooms and the thoughtful details that turned large houses into livable homes. The women of the Gold Coast were not just spectators in a wealthy world. They were active participants, shaping social life, household culture, and the atmosphere of the estates. Their influence was woven into daily routines, grand events, and private moments alike, leaving a lasting mark on the Gold Coast's history. Not every Gold Coast mansion survived the spotlight. While some estates were carefully preserved or repurposed, many others slowly slipped into obscurity. These forgotten mansions once stood as symbols of power and wealth, but over time, changing fortunes and shifting priorities pushed them into silence. Hidden behind trees, walls, or modern developments, they tell a quieter story of the Gold Coast. During the height of the Gilded Age, new estates were built at an astonishing pace. Families competed to outdo one another, and construction costs were rarely a concern. But as decades passed, maintaining these massive properties became difficult. Heating, repairs, staffing, and taxes required enormous resources. When family fortunes changed, these mansions were often the first things to suffer. Some estates were abandoned after a single generation. Heirs who inherited them found the scale overwhelming or unnecessary. Others preferred city life or modern homes, leaving the old mansions behind. Without regular care, roofs leaked, gardens grew wild, and interiors faded. Rooms that once hosted grand events became dusty and silent. Economic shifts played a major role. The Great Depression forced many families to sell or demolish their estates. Even wealthy owners struggled to justify the cost of maintaining properties that no longer fit the times. In some cases, mansions were torn down entirely, their materials sold or reused elsewhere. What remained were memories, photographs, and names recorded in old documents. Some forgotten mansions found new purposes. A few were converted into schools, hospitals, or institutions. While this gave the buildings a second life, it often meant altering their original design. Ballrooms became auditoriums, libraries became offices, and private bedrooms were turned into classrooms. The elegance remained in fragments, carved ceilings, staircases, or fireplaces, but much was lost in the process. Others were divided into apartments or sold piece by piece. Large estates were broken up into smaller lots, their grounds replaced by suburban homes. Gates were removed, gardens disappeared, and long driveways were shortened or erased. What once felt like a private world became part of a growing neighborhood, blending into everyday life. Some mansions remained standing but forgotten. Hidden behind overgrown trees or tall fences, they exist quietly, known only to locals or historians. These buildings may still have stained glass windows, grand staircases, or ornate facades, but without regular attention they slowly deteriorate. Paint peels, stone cracks, and details fade with time. Urban development also contributed to their disappearance. As Long Island grew, land became more valuable for housing and commercial use. Estates were seen less as historic landmarks and more as opportunities. Developers prioritized efficiency over preservation, and many mansions were lost to progress. Roads, shopping centers, and housing developments replaced once grand properties. Some forgotten mansions carry stories of mystery. Rumors of abandoned rooms, locked wings, and forgotten furniture circulate among locals. While many of these stories are exaggerated, they reflect a sense of curiosity and nostalgia. Walking past a neglected estate, it's easy to imagine the life that once filled its halls. Preservation efforts have saved a few of these properties, but not all. Restoring a mansion requires funding, expertise, and commitment. For every estate saved, many others continue to decline quietly. Historical societies document what they can using photographs, maps, and written records to preserve memories, even when buildings are lost. Forgotten mansions also remind us how quickly wealth can change. A family that once hosted lavish events could, within decades, see their home abandoned or demolished. These estates stand as evidence that even the most impressive symbols of success are not guaranteed to last. Today, traces of these mansions can still be found. A stone wall here, a gatepost there, or a street name referencing an old estate offers clues to the past. Even when the buildings are gone, the landscape remembers. The layout of roads, the shape of neighborhoods, and the names of places reflect what once stood there. The forgotten mansions of the Gold Coast may no longer dominate the skyline, but their presence lingers. Their stories survive in archives, memories, and the quiet corners of Long Island where traces of grandeur remain, waiting to be noticed by those who know where to look. Behind the grand doors and polished hallways of Gold Coast estates, there was another layer most guests never saw. Hidden passages, narrow corridors, concealed staircases, and secret doors quietly built into walls, bookcases, and closets. These were not movie-style tunnels made for drama. They were practical, discreet, and sometimes surprisingly clever. Large estates needed efficient movement. Servants had to move quickly without disturbing guests. Hidden passages allowed staff to carry food, laundry, and supplies from one area to another without being seen. Kitchens were often far from dining rooms, and these passages helped meals arrive hot and on time. From the outside, a dinner looked effortless. Behind the scenes, it was a carefully choreographed operation. Many passages were designed to blend perfectly into the architecture. A wooden panel might swing open to reveal a narrow staircase. A bookshelf could hide a doorway. Walls were built thicker than necessary, allowing space for corridors that ran alongside main rooms. Guests could sit in a drawing room for hours and never realize someone was moving just a few feet away behind the wall. These hidden routes weren't only for servants. Families used them too. Owners could move through the house privately, avoiding crowded hallways or unexpected visitors. Some passages connected bedrooms to libraries, studies, or private sitting rooms. Others led directly to gardens or side entrances, allowing discreet exits or quiet walks without crossing public areas. Children often discovered these passages by accident. A loose panel, a strange door, or a staircase that seemed to go nowhere could quickly become a secret playground. While adults saw them as practical features, kids saw adventure. A short hallway could feel like a maze, and a hidden stairway could turn the entire mansion into a place of exploration. Some passages connected to service areas like pantries, storage rooms, or staff quarters. Servants relied on these routes to stay out of sight, especially during parties. Etiquette at the time valued smooth service without visible effort. The hidden passages helped maintain the illusion that everything simply happened perfectly and quietly. In some estates, passages linked entire wings of the house. A long corridor might run behind several rooms, with small doors opening into each one. This allowed staff to respond quickly to bells or requests. These systems were designed with efficiency in mind, showing just how carefully these homes were planned. Not all hidden passages were purely practical. Some reflected personal preferences or habits. A homeowner might want a private path to a study or a discreet way to reach a bedroom without passing through common areas. In houses where guests stayed for long periods, privacy mattered. These passages provided control over movement and interaction inside the home. Construction of these features required precision. Architects and builders had to plan them from the beginning. Walls, staircases, and floors were designed to hide doors and corridors seamlessly. Poor design could make a passage obvious, which defeated its purpose. The best hidden passages were invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Over time, some passages were forgotten. When estates changed hands, new owners sometimes had no idea they existed. Renovations sealed doors shut or covered them with furniture. A wall might be rebuilt without realizing a corridor lay behind it. Years later, workers might uncover a hidden staircase during repairs, surprising everyone involved. Maintenance staff and caretakers occasionally rediscovered these features. Opening a sealed door could reveal an old corridor, dusty but intact. Some passages still had hooks, lamps, or signs of frequent use. Others were empty, silent reminders of how the house once functioned. Not every hidden passage led somewhere dramatic. Some ended abruptly or connected small spaces. Their purpose might have been temporary or specific to a previous owner's routine. Still, even the simplest passage adds depth to the story of an estate, showing how much thought went into daily life behind the scenes. Security also played a role. Some passages allowed quick movement during emergencies or provided alternative exits. While estates were generally safe, owners liked having options. A discreet route to the outside could be useful without drawing attention. Today, many hidden passages remain closed or inaccessible. Preservation rules, safety concerns, or modern renovations have limited access. Still, their presence is often hinted at through unusual wall thicknesses, odd door placements, or unexplained staircases. Architects studying these homes can often spot clues, even if the passages themselves are no longer usable. Walking through a Gold Coast estate, it's easy to focus on the visible beauty, but behind that beauty lies a network of hidden spaces designed for efficiency, privacy, and control. These passages were not meant to be admired. They were meant to function quietly, supporting the grand life unfolding in the open rooms of the house. The hidden passages of the Gold Coast remain one of the most fascinating features of these estates. Silent, unseen, and carefully planned, they reveal how life truly worked inside the mansions, smooth on the surface, complex underneath, and always moving just out of sight. Walking into a Gold Coast mansion was like stepping into a private museum. These estates were not just about size or architecture. Inside, they were filled with art, antiques, and treasures collected from around the world. Every room had something meant to impress, start conversations, or quietly show how powerful and cultured the family was. Art collecting became a serious pursuit among Gold Coast families. Paintings by European masters, sculptures inspired by classical mythology, and tapestries woven centuries earlier were proudly displayed. Some families worked with professional art dealers who traveled across Europe to secure rare pieces. Others inherited collections or built them slowly, one carefully chosen item at a time. Paintings were often the centerpiece of major rooms. Large oil portraits hung in dining rooms, libraries, and hallways. Landscapes, historical scenes, and classical figures dominated the walls. Frames were often as impressive as the artwork itself, carved in gold or detailed wood. Guests didn't just look at the art, they were meant to notice it, talk about it, and remember it. Sculptures added another layer. Marble statues lined hallways, stood at the base of staircases, or filled garden-facing rooms with natural light. Some sculptures were replicas of famous European works, while others were originals commissioned specifically for the estate. Bronze figures, busts of philosophers, and mythological scenes were common choices, signaling education and refinement. Furniture itself was often a treasure. Chairs, tables, cabinets, and desks were imported from France, Italy, and England. Many pieces were antiques, carefully restored and placed to match the room's style. A single chair might be older than the United States itself. Furniture wasn't chosen for comfort alone, it was chosen for history, craftsmanship, and visual impact. Libraries were particularly impressive. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes. First editions, rare manuscripts, and signed copies quietly rested among thousands of books. Some libraries included reading desks, globes, and ladders designed to reach the highest shelves. Even if the books weren't read daily, their presence suggested intelligence, curiosity, and authority. Decorative objects filled smaller spaces. Porcelain vases, silver tea sets, clocks, and intricate lamps decorated side tables and display cases. Many of these items were collected during travels or purchased from specialized dealers. Some objects were fragile and valuable, handled only by trained staff. Others were purely decorative, chosen because they looked expensive, and they were. Wall decorations went beyond paintings. Tapestries covered entire walls, adding warmth and texture. Hand-woven rugs from Persia or Turkey covered marble floors, softening footsteps and adding color. Mirrors were placed strategically to reflect light, artwork, and chandeliers, making rooms feel even larger and brighter. Private collections were sometimes hidden from guests. Small rooms or locked cabinets stored jewelry, coins, rare documents, or personal art pieces. These collections were meant for family eyes only. Some families kept detailed records of their treasures, while others relied on memory and trust. In either case, these hidden collections added another layer to the estate's mystery. Music also played a role in the treasure-filled interiors. Grand pianos, violins, and other instruments were both functional and decorative. Music rooms displayed instruments like works of art, polished and positioned carefully. Sheet music, stands, and seating arrangements completed the scene, suggesting evenings filled with live performances and quiet entertainment. Art wasn't limited to traditional forms. Some estates featured custom murals painted directly onto walls or ceilings. These murals depicted landscapes, mythological scenes, or family histories. Skilled artists spent months creating them, often working in uncomfortable positions high above the floor. Once completed, the murals became permanent parts of the home's identity. Lighting enhanced everything. Chandeliers made of crystal or glass hung from high ceilings, casting light across artwork and furnishings. Lamps with stained glass shades added color and warmth. The placement of light was intentional, highlighting certain pieces and guiding the eye through a room. Art and lighting worked together to create atmosphere. Servants played a key role in maintaining these treasures. Dusting, polishing, and careful cleaning were daily tasks. Temperature and humidity were monitored, even before modern systems made it easier. A damaged painting or scratched surface was unacceptable. The goal was preservation as much as display. Over time, collections changed. Some items were sold, donated, or passed down through generations. Others were lost during estate sales or renovations. Still, Many Gold Coast estates retain parts of their original collections, offering glimpses into the tastes and priorities of their former owners. Walking through these rooms today, it's impossible to miss the care and intention behind every object. Art and treasures were not random decorations. They were carefully chosen elements of a larger design, shaping how the estate felt, functioned, and impressed. Every painting, sculpture, and antique played a role in turning these houses into worlds filled with beauty, history, and quiet power. When night falls on the Gold Coast estates, the mood changes. The grand houses grow quiet, the gardens stop whispering with footsteps, and the long hallways feel a little longer than they did during the day. This is when stories begin to surface. Stories of shadows, sounds, and moments that don't quite have an explanation. Over time, these have become known as the ghosts of the Gold Coast. Many of these estates are old, and age alone can create strange experiences. Wood settles, floors creak, and wind moves through chimneys and corridors. Still, people who have lived or worked in these mansions often describe things that feel different from ordinary house noises. A door that opens on its own, footsteps in an empty hallway, a sudden cold draft in a closed room. Some stories come from former servants. Staff members who worked late nights or early mornings sometimes reported hearing voices when no one else was around. A maid might swear she heard someone calling her name, only to find the room empty. A caretaker might notice lights on in a wing of the house that had been closed for years. These moments didn't always feel frightening, but they were unsettling enough to be remembered. One common story involves grand staircases. People describe hearing footsteps going up or down, slow and deliberate, even when the house is empty. The sound often stops suddenly, as if whoever was walking simply disappeared. Staircases were central features of these estates, used constantly during their busiest years, which makes them natural places for stories to grow. Ballrooms are another favorite setting for ghost stories. Late at night, when the room is dark and silent, some claim they can hear faint music or laughter. Others describe seeing reflections move in mirrors when no one is there. These spaces once hosted hundreds of people, filled with sound and movement, and now they sit quiet. The contrast alone can make the imagination work overtime. Bedrooms have their own reputation. Some caretakers report feeling watched in certain rooms or experiencing sudden chills. Old four-poster beds, heavy curtains, and dim lighting add to the atmosphere. In houses where family members passed away, these rooms often become the focus of ghostly rumors, even if nothing unusual has ever been proven. Gardens aren't free from stories either. Nighttime walks through estate grounds sometimes include sightings of figures near fountains or pathways, a shape moving between trees, a presence felt but not seen. These gardens were once busy with guests, staff, and family members, and now they sit mostly empty, making any movement feel more noticeable. Some stories focus on specific individuals: a former owner who loved the estate too much to ever leave, a servant who spent decades working in the same house, a guest who never returned home. These characters become part of estate lore, passed from one generation of workers to the next. Details may change, but the names and locations remain the same. Not every story is dramatic. Some are quiet and subtle. A chair slightly moved, a clock stopping at the same time every night, a piano key pressed softly with no one near it. These moments don't cause panic. They simply leave people wondering what just happened. Renovations often bring new stories. When walls are opened or rooms restored, Workers sometimes report strange feelings or unexpected events. Tools go missing. Sounds echo from closed spaces. Old rooms uncovered after years of being sealed seem to carry a heavy atmosphere, even before anything is done to them. Of course, not everyone believes these stories. Many explanations are practical. Old buildings behave differently at night. Sounds travel in unexpected ways. The human brain looks for patterns, especially in quiet and unfamiliar places. Still, even skeptics admit that some moments are hard to explain, especially when experienced firsthand. What makes the Gold Coast especially rich in ghost stories is its history. These estates saw intense emotions: joy, stress, celebration, loss, and isolation, all within the same walls. Over time, those emotions become part of the narrative, shaping how people experience the space. Some estates quietly accept their reputation. Caretakers learn which rooms feel strange and which hallways are best avoided late at night. Others laugh it off, using humor to deal with the unease. Either way, the stories continue, passed along through whispers and late-night conversations. Today, visitors sometimes ask about ghosts during tours. Guides may smile, share a mild story, or change the subject. Whether believed or not, these tales add another layer to the Gold Coast's identity. The houses stand still, the rooms remain silent, and the night settles in, carrying with it stories that never fully fade away. At their peak, the Gold Coast estates felt untouchable. Money seemed endless, staff numbers were high, and the houses were always alive with activity. But time has a way of changing even the grandest places. Slowly, and sometimes quietly, the Gilded Age estates began to decline. Not all at once, not in the same way, but steadily enough to change the entire landscape of the Gold Coast. One major reason for the decline was cost. These estates were expensive to run even during their best years. Heating dozens of rooms, maintaining massive gardens, repairing roofs, stonework, and interiors required constant spending. As fortunes shifted and business conditions changed, some families found it harder to justify the expense. A house that once symbolized success became a financial burden. Generational change also played a role. The original builders of these estates often had a deep emotional connection to them. They had designed every room, chosen every detail, and used the houses as symbols of their achievements. Their children and grandchildren didn't always feel the same way. Many heirs preferred modern homes, city life, or smaller properties that required less upkeep. Large estates felt outdated and impractical. Economic downturns accelerated the decline. The Great Depression was especially damaging. Income dropped, investments failed, and maintaining enormous properties became unrealistic. Some families sold their estates at a fraction of their original value. Others closed entire wings of their homes to save money. Rooms once used daily were locked and left untouched for years. Staffing became another challenge. At their height, estates employed dozens of servants. But as budgets tightened, staff numbers were reduced. Without enough workers, daily operations became harder. Gardens were trimmed less often, rooms went unused, and maintenance tasks were delayed. The smooth, effortless life these estates were built for slowly faded. Taxes also increased over time. Property taxes on large estates rose as surrounding areas developed. What was once rural land became valuable real estate. Owners found themselves paying high taxes on properties that no longer matched their lifestyle or needs. Selling land or subdividing estates became a practical solution for many families. Social changes mattered too. The formal lifestyle of the Gilded Age lost its appeal. Large balls, strict dress codes, and rigid social rules felt old-fashioned. People preferred smaller gatherings and simpler living. Without constant entertaining, the need for massive ballrooms and guest wings disappeared. Estates designed for social performance felt oversized and unnecessary. Technology played a quiet role in the decline. New building standards, modern heating systems, and updated layouts made older houses feel inefficient. Retrofitting a mansion built decades earlier was expensive and complicated. Instead of renovating, many owners chose to sell or abandon parts of their properties. Some estates were repurposed. Schools, hospitals, and institutions moved into former mansions, altering their interiors to fit new needs. While this preserved the buildings, it also erased much of their original character. Walls were added, rooms were divided, and decorative features were removed or covered. The houses remained standing, but their original purpose was gone. Others were demolished. Developers saw opportunity in the land itself rather than the buildings. Mansions were torn down and neighborhoods replaced them. Long driveways became streets. Gardens became backyards. Only old photographs and estate names hinted at what once stood there. Natural wear also took its toll. Stone cracked, wood rotted, and roofs leaked. Without constant care, damage spread quickly. Some estates fell into visible disrepair, becoming shadows of their former selves. Windows were boarded, furniture removed, and rooms left empty. Silence replaced the activity that once defined them. Local communities slowly adapted. Where estates once dominated the coastline, smaller homes and public spaces appeared. Roads expanded, businesses opened, and the Gold Coast became more accessible. The area shifted from private wealth to shared use, changing its identity. Despite the decline, remnants of the Gilded Age estates remain visible. Gateposts stand without gates. Stone walls line modern roads. Estate names live on in street signs and local maps. These fragments quietly mark where grandeur once existed. The decline of the Gilded Age estates was not sudden or dramatic. It happened through small decisions, financial pressures, and changing values. One wing closed, one garden neglected, one property sold. Over time, the world that created these estates moved on, leaving behind structures that could no longer keep up with a new era. Today, the Gold Coast estates live very different lives than they once did. The days of constant parties, large staffs, and full households are mostly gone. Instead, these estates now exist in many forms, shaped by modern needs, rules, and lifestyles. Some are carefully preserved, some are repurposed, and others quietly blend into everyday life along Long Island's North Shore. Many estates are now museums or historic sites. These properties are maintained to show what life once looked like during the Gilded Age. Visitors walk through restored rooms, guided by staff who explain architecture, furniture, and daily routines. Ballrooms are quiet, bedrooms are staged, and kitchens are frozen in time. These estates are no longer private homes, but shared spaces meant for learning and exploration. Some mansions have become educational institutions. Schools and colleges use former estates as campuses or administrative buildings. Classrooms now exist where drawing rooms once stood. Libraries serve students instead of wealthy families. While interiors have been modified for safety and practicality, traces of the past remain in staircases, windows, and decorative ceilings. Other estates are used for events, weddings, fundraisers, and private gatherings bring life back into these buildings, even if only temporarily. Guests walk through halls designed for entertaining, once again filling them with conversation and movement. These events are carefully managed, balancing modern needs with preservation rules. A number of estates are still private residences. These are often owned by individuals or families who value privacy and history. Living in such a property today requires commitment. Owners must maintain large buildings, follow preservation guidelines, and manage ongoing repairs. While modern systems are added discreetly, the character of the house is often protected. Some properties have been divided. Large estates are split into smaller homes or housing developments. Original mansions may remain, surrounded by newer buildings, or they may be converted into apartments. In these cases, the scale of the original property is harder to recognize, but architectural details still hint at its past. Preservation laws now play a major role. Many estates are protected by local or state regulations that limit changes. Owners must get approval before altering structures, landscapes, or interiors. This helps prevent complete loss, but can also make maintenance more complex. Repairs often take longer and cost more due to historical requirements. Gardens have also changed. Some are restored to their original designs, using historical records and photographs. Others are simplified to reduce upkeep. Lawns replace intricate flower beds, and fountains may no longer operate. Still, stone paths, terraces, and old trees remain, shaping the landscape. Technology has been carefully integrated. Modern heating, electrical systems, and security are installed without disrupting historic features. Wires are hidden, systems are placed out of sight, and updates are done quietly. The goal is comfort without visual disruption. Public access varies. Some estates welcome visitors daily. Others open only for special events or guided tours. Private estates remain closed entirely. This creates a mix of visibility and mystery. Locals may pass by gates and walls every day without ever seeing what lies inside. Maintenance remains a challenge. Weather, age, and usage all affect these buildings. Stone needs repair, wood requires treatment, and roofs must be replaced carefully. Skilled craftsmen are often needed to match original materials and techniques. This makes upkeep slow but precise. Community perception has shifted. Where estates were once symbols of private wealth, many are now viewed as cultural landmarks. They contribute to local identity and tourism. Residents may feel pride in living near these historic properties, even if they never enter them. Some estates serve multiple roles. A single property might host tours, educational programs, and private events. This flexibility helps fund preservation while keeping the estate active. Rooms are adapted carefully, allowing modern use without erasing historical features. Changes in ownership continue. Estates are bought, sold, and transferred, sometimes quietly. Each new owner brings different priorities, influencing how the property is used and maintained. Some focus on restoration, others on adaptation. Walking along the Gold Coast today, the estates feel calmer. There is less noise, less movement, and fewer people. But the buildings still stand, shaped by time and care. Their presence defines the landscape, even as their purpose continues to evolve. Beyond the gates and long driveways of the Gold Coast estates, there is another layer of history that rarely makes it into guidebooks. These are the hidden corners and local secrets, small places, quiet details, and lesser-known stories that exist just outside the grand halls and formal gardens. They are easy to miss, but once noticed, they add depth to the Gold Coast experience. Some hidden corners are physical spaces, narrow paths between estates, old stone staircases leading down toward the water, or forgotten roads once used by servants and delivery carts. These routes were never meant for guests. They were practical, simple, and quietly efficient. Over time, trees grew, fences changed, and many of these paths faded from view, known only to long-time locals. Along the shoreline, there are small coves and rocky inlets that once served private purposes. Some were used for rowing boats, others for discreet arrivals by water. These spots offered privacy away from the main docks. Today, they appear peaceful and ordinary, but they once played a quiet role in estate life. Local residents often know details visitors never hear. A bend in the road where an old gate once stood. A patch of land where a carriage house used to be. A group of trees planted to hide a service building. These details are passed down casually, mentioned during walks or conversations, and slowly become part of local memory rather than official history. Some secrets are tied to buildings no longer standing. A modern home might sit where a guest house once existed. A parking area could cover the foundation of a former greenhouse. Without records or photographs, these places blend into the present. Only a change in ground level or an odd stone wall hints at what used to be there. Old tunnels and drainage systems are another quiet secret. Built to manage water flow or connect service areas, some still exist underground. Most are sealed or inaccessible, but their presence affects landscaping and construction today. Workers sometimes discover old brick channels or stone-lined passages while repairing roads or utilities. Local legends add another layer. Stories of hidden rooms, sealed doors, or forgotten safes circulate quietly. While many are exaggerated, they reflect curiosity about what might still be hidden. Even when nothing is found, the stories themselves become part of the area's character. Certain viewpoints are known only to locals. A gap between trees that frames an estate perfectly. A hilltop spot where multiple rooftops can be seen at once. These views are not marked or promoted. They are discovered by walking, observing, and spending time in the area. Service structures also hold secrets. Old pump houses, storage sheds, and utility buildings were often designed to blend into the landscape. Some still stand repurposed or quietly abandoned. Without knowing their original purpose, they look like simple outbuildings. Their history is hidden in plain sight. Even street layouts hold clues. Curved roads sometimes follow old estate boundaries. Dead ends may mark former private entrances. Street names often reference families or features that no longer exist. These details quietly map the past onto the present. Local caretakers and groundskeepers are often the keepers of practical secrets. They know which trees are original, which walls are decorative, and which areas flood after heavy rain. Their knowledge comes from daily interaction with the land, not from books or tours. Some secrets are seasonal. In winter, when leaves fall, old walls and paths become visible again. In spring, certain plants bloom where gardens once existed. These changes reveal patterns that are hidden for most of the year. Quiet sounds also play a role. The way wind moves through old trees, water flowing through unseen channels, footsteps echoing differently near stone structures. These sensory details create a subtle connection to the past without needing explanation. Not all hidden corners are old. New routines and habits form quietly. A shortcut locals take, a bench placed where people naturally stop, a path worn into the grass by repeated use. Over time, these become part of the area's rhythm. What makes these hidden corners special is their simplicity. They are not dramatic or grand. They don't demand attention. They exist quietly, shaped by history, use, and time. Walking through the Gold Coast with an eye for these details reveals a different story. One that unfolds slowly, through observation rather than display. The estates may define the skyline, but it's the hidden corners and local secrets that fill the spaces in between, shaping how the area is truly experienced. The Gold Coast doesn't speak loudly anymore, but it still teaches quietly. Its estates, roads, gardens, and empty spaces show patterns that repeat again and again, not through speeches or grand statements, but through what remains and what disappeared. The lessons are not written on plaques. They sit in stone walls, faded paths, and oversized rooms that no longer serve their original purpose. One clear lesson comes from scale. The estates were built to impress, to dominate landscapes, and to last forever. But scale has limits. Rooms that once felt exciting became difficult to maintain. Wings designed for guests stayed empty. Ballrooms built for hundreds stood silent most of the year. The Gold Coast shows how size can become a challenge once the lifestyle that supported it fades. Another lesson appears in design choices. Many estates were built with extreme attention to detail. Architects planned everything from window placement to how light moved through rooms. Some designs aged well, others did not. Styles that once felt modern later felt heavy or impractical. The houses show how design reflects its time and how tastes shift, even when buildings remain. The Gold Coast also shows how wealth concentrates effort. Money allowed families to hire the best architects, artists, and craftsmen. That effort created beauty, but it also required constant support. Without continued investment, even the finest materials wear down. Stone cracks, wood warps, and gardens return to nature. The estates demonstrate that creation is only half the process. Maintenance is the other half. Social structure is another quiet lesson. These homes were designed around formal interaction. Separate rooms for guests, staff, and family reflected strict social boundaries. Over time, those boundaries loosened. Modern life favors flexibility and shared spaces. The rigid layouts of many estates became difficult to adapt. The buildings reveal how architecture follows social habits, not the other way around. There is also a lesson in privacy. High walls, long driveways, and hidden service routes created separation from the outside world. That privacy protected families, but it also isolated them. Estates were self-contained environments. Over time, isolation made them feel disconnected from growing communities around them. The Gold Coast shows how separation can slowly turn into distance. Ownership tells another story. Many estates passed through multiple hands. Each owner made changes, sometimes subtle, sometimes dramatic. Some restored details. Others simplified or removed them. The buildings became layered with decisions. The result is a mix of original intent and later adaptation. The lesson sits in those layers, showing how places evolve through use rather than intention alone. The land itself offers lessons. Gardens designed with precision eventually changed shape. Trees grew taller than expected. Water features stopped functioning. Paths disappeared under grass. Nature slowly adjusted what humans tried to control. The Gold Coast landscapes show how time reshapes even the most carefully planned environments. Economics plays its role quietly. When fortunes shifted, priorities changed. Estates were sold, divided, or repurposed. Land became more valuable than buildings. Decisions followed practicality rather than sentiment. The Gold Coast shows how economic pressure influences preservation, development, and loss without needing dramatic events. Community growth adds another layer. Roads expanded, neighborhoods formed. Former private land became shared space. What was once exclusive became accessible. The estates now sit within a larger social fabric. Their presence affects surrounding areas, but they no longer define them completely. The lesson appears in how landmarks adapt within growing communities. There is also a lesson in function. Many estates survived by changing roles. Museums, schools, event spaces, and institutions gave them new purpose. Buildings that stayed flexible lasted longer. Those that could not adapt disappeared. The Gold Coast shows how usefulness often determines survival more than beauty alone. Memory plays a subtle role. Even when estates are gone, names remain. Streets, parks, and neighborhoods carry echoes of what once existed. Memory does not need a building to survive. It needs repetition and recognition. The Gold Coast landscape quietly preserves memory through language and layout. Another lesson appears in craftsmanship. Details like hand-carved wood, stonework, and iron gates still stand decades later. Even when neglected, they show durability. These features contrast with later additions that age faster. The estates reveal how materials and methods influence longevity. Time itself is the final teacher here. The Gold Coast was not undone overnight. Change came slowly, one decision at a time, one repair delayed, one wing closed, one property sold. The result was gradual transformation rather than sudden collapse. Walking through the Gold Coast today, these lessons don't announce themselves. They appear through observation, in how spaces feel oversized or carefully reused, in how old structures coexist with modern life, in how silence fills rooms once designed for noise. The Gold Coast continues to exist as a record of choices made, repeated, and adjusted, not frozen in one moment, but stretched across decades. Its lessons remain embedded in its spaces, visible to those who take the time to notice them. The Gold Coast no longer lives the way it once did. The grand estates still stand, some carefully preserved, others quietly changed. But the world that created them has moved on. What remains is not a frozen moment in time, but a collection of spaces shaped by decades of use, neglect, adaptation, and memory. Walking through the Gold Coast today feels different from imagining it during its busiest years. The long driveways are quieter. The gates open less often. Ballrooms no longer echo with music every night. Gardens are trimmed for maintenance, not display. The pace is slower, calmer, and more restrained. Yet the estates still hold presence. Their scale, materials, and layout speak clearly, even without words. Stone walls still define boundaries. Staircases still guide movement. Windows still frame views designed long ago. These elements were built with intention, and that intention lingers in how the spaces feel. The Gold Coast tells its story through layers. Each generation left something behind, sometimes carefully, sometimes unintentionally. Renovations covered old details. New uses changed room functions. Trees grew where gardens were once symmetrical. The result is not loss alone, but transformation. Some estates remain instantly recognizable, restored to reflect their original designs. Others are harder to read. A former ballroom might now serve a different purpose. A library might be divided into offices. Even so, the proportions and craftsmanship remain visible. The bones of the past still support the present. There is a quiet contrast between what these places were built for and how they are used now. They were designed for display, social structure, and control. Today they serve education, public access, private living, or preservation. The spaces adjusted without fully losing their identity. The landscape itself carries memory. Roads curve around former boundaries. Shorelines reflect old access points. Trees planted for privacy still shape sightlines. Even when buildings are gone, the land remembers where they once stood. Silence plays a role now. Where noise once filled rooms, there is space. Where movement was constant, there is pause. This quiet does not erase history. It allows it to settle. What remains strongest is atmosphere. The way light moves through tall windows, the sound of footsteps on stone, the feeling of scale when entering a large room. These experiences connect the present to the past without explanation. The Gold Coast does not demand attention anymore. It does not compete or impress in the way it once did. It exists steadily, shaped by time and circumstance. People interact with it differently now. Some pass by daily without thinking about what lies behind the walls. Others seek it out intentionally, curious about its history. Caretakers, historians, residents, and visitors all experience it in their own way. There is no single ending to the Gold Coast story. The estates continue to change. Some will be restored, others will be repurposed again. A few may disappear entirely. What stays consistent is the trace they leave behind. The Gold Coast remains a place where ambition once took physical form, where ideas about wealth, beauty, and permanence were built into stone, wood, and landscape. Those ideas didn't vanish, they softened, adjusted, and settled into the background of everyday life. Standing near these estates today, it's easy to sense that something happened here. Not in a dramatic way, but in layers. Through years of activity, expectation, and routine, the buildings absorbed that energy and still carry it quietly. The Gold Coast does not need explanation to exist. It does not rely on stories being told loudly. Its presence is enough. Walls stand, paths remain, spaces hold shape. This is what remains of that world, not the noise, not the excess, but the structure it left behind. A landscape shaped by human intention, now moving at its own pace, holding echoes that never fully disappear.